On now to our next panel, and it is again, it's as I mentioned at the beginning, it's going to be looking at one of CTV's maybe our biggest challenges that we have, which is fragmentation. It's been a reoccurring theme at every CTV day that we've run. So I'm delighted to introduce Paul Gubbins, who is the VP of Strategy at Publica by IAS. And Paul, I'm hoping that alongside your brilliant panel, you're going to solve it all and crack it within 30 minutes and tell us how we can improve fragmentation.
We will certainly try.
Amazing. All right, then over to you, Paul, to work your magic on this very important topic.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Gubbins. I look after strategy for a global CTV ad server called Publica. But enough about me. Welcome, panelists. I think I'm just going to go around the virtual room and ask everybody to introduce themselves. Adam, let's start with yourself, please, buddy.
Let's just make sure I'm off of mute. Am I off of mute?
Yeah, we've got you loud and clear.
Hello, mate. How are you? Nice to see everybody. I'm Adam. I am the broadcast director here at Microsoft, working on our Microsoft Invest platform and Xandr platform historically, working across all broadcasters, including some of the big CTV players and SVOD platforms that we work with.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. Sarah, over to you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Lewis. I'm Global Director of CTV at Showheroes Group. So I work with all of our markets from a supply kind of product demand perspective. I mean, apologies, my cat just tried to make an appearance. So he's not an expert in CTV though, so we will get rid of him now.
Thank you very much. Stafanie?
Hello, can you actually hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Can you see me? Because I can't.
Not at the moment.
Okay, something is wrong with my camera. That's not ideal, but at least you can hear me. Hi, everyone. My name is Stafanie Briec. I head up demand sales for UK and international at Audience Express, which is part of Freewheel.
Excellent. Thank you. And last but not least, Jaidev, over to you, buddy.
Hi, guys. I am Jaidev Kakar, and I look after EMEA demand for CTV at PubMatic.
Excellent. Let's get stuck in then to the questions. I know we've all debated this one at length on the prep call, but it'd be interesting to hear if any of your opinions have changed since we last caught up. Lots of people talk about how fragmented the growing CTV ecosystem is at the moment, especially from a European point of view. But how much is that fragmentation really holding back ad spend? And is it really as fragmented as some people say it actually is? Adam, I'm going to go to you first. What's your school of thought as to where we're currently at? So if you're in an advertiser's shoes or an agency that's looking after that brand and somebody says you really should be spending on CTV, what do they think?
What do they think? It's a great question, right? And I think many of us agreed that there's a differentiator between fragmentation from a user content perspective, who's watching what, and the ability to buy it. So I think from a user perspective, there are more and more CTV platforms out there than there's ever been. You've got the likes of Virgin Media, for example, launching fast channels. You've got all of the SVOD companies like Netflix and Disney coming out with AVOD platforms. So it's just becoming more and more complicated from a sort of viewing perspective. That's not easy to watch content in the CTV ecosystem. You find your content you want to watch. The TV manufacturers make that very easy these days. But the buying piece, is that complicated? I think we're probably getting to a lot of discussion about how difficult is it to buy CTV these days. I think we're very lucky that 10 years on, 15 years on in programmatic, we've now got the sort of pipe technology to enable buying, to make it very simple to navigate this fragmentation. And I'm sure lots of other people on this call will talk about that as well.
Yeah, fair enough. And you mentioned fast. So let's say, for instance, somebody's listening to this webinar at the moment and they're not 100% sure on what fast actually is and how it differs maybe from AVOD. In a sentence, can you just maybe articulate what fast is and why people keep talking about it in CTV circles?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, VOD, video on demand, you find the piece of content that you want to watch and effectively download or stream it to your box or your phone or whatever it may be. Fast is a little bit different, is it's a bit more akin to traditional linear TV. You'll find a channel or a show that you might want to watch, but it's based on a schedule. So, you'll log into a channel, you will watch a piece of content, and then there will be scheduled ad breaks. The acronym, I'm going to get this wrong, free ad-supported TV. Is that right?
Yeah, my understanding. Sarah, I know you've written a lot about fast and some of the different models of distribution when it comes to streaming content. What's your view on where we are at the moment in regards to fragmentation, and all of the different environments now where advertisers can actually engage with streaming audiences?
Yeah, I think it is fragmented, let's face it. I think we've made progress. I do think we have made progress. There's particular companies and partners that have been able to navigate all of them. So you can have something underpinning, whether it's from a measurement point of view, targeting, creative. I think that does help. So working with a partner who can do that, I think, is important. But one thing that's, I think, difficult for buyers in the CTV space is it's not always clear who owns the inventory. You can have the same content on the same platform be owned by a different kind of part of the chain, whether that is a tech partner, whether that's the content provider, the OEM, the actual device. That's something I think we haven't really seen as much in other screens.
Yeah, and I guess you're right. Lots of people talk about supply path optimization in the digital world and trying to maybe move beyond resellers. But in CTV, it's not that black and white because you've got licensing agreements, distribution deals. So a reseller, for instance, in the CTV sense, doesn't necessarily equate to margin or data that you're not seeing. That's just the nature of delivery when it comes to some of these new emerging streaming environments.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the content partners, there's some really amazing productions houses making beautiful content that don't necessarily have the experience in selling the advertising space and are working with platforms and reseller partners or whatever it is in order to actually monetize that and don't do it directly. So actually you can miss out on actual inventory and quality, good kind of programs and things. So I think, underpinning it is really important. It doesn't make it easy to navigate because you could easily go, no, I don't want that publisher in it, or I'm already buying that publisher. But then actually you realize 70% of their inventory is with the content provider. So actually, if you miss them out on there, it does get complicated. But I think we have made steps forward. I think there are certain ways that we can, with targeting, contextual targeting, with SSP kind of group deals, all these things that are helping. I think it will get probably a little bit worse before it gets better, though, because there's definitely, obviously, we've already mentioned new services launching, like Prime adding ads, all different ones kind of launching next year. So it will get a little bit worse, but I think we're making progress.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And Jaidev, you work at PubMatic, one of the biggest global SSPs in the market. You deal with lots of streaming publishers, lots of programmatic ad buyers. What's your take on the European CTV ecosystem at the moment? Are buyers really finding that fragmentation of barrier to entry, or is it just about education and making sure that those on the buy side really understand the CTV supply ecosystem?
So I actually think Helen, everyone, and Donatus and the panel before have all alluded to, I can't firstly believe we're still talking about fragmentation in CTV, but I actually think fragmentation in many ways is a sign of a healthy CTV landscape. So if you hear me out, you've got CTV view accounts that are growing and audiences as a result demanding more. So services are arriving to accommodate those demands. This in turn leads to more subscriptions and a growing audience who continue to be drawn to CTV for new and exclusive content, unique channels, etc. So it becomes a loop of that kind of encourages a bit of fragmentation. If I use an example of maybe myself, just because we've got Adam here, I'll use Netflix. So I'm watching, say, the David Beckham documentary on the TV at home. I pause it and then I carry on watching it on my phone while I'm traveling. This is great because it means that I have the content I want, where I want it, and it's seamless. It's a really good user experience. And from a publisher's perspective or streaming channels perspective, it's good as well because you keep the customer happy. From a buying perspective, it's an absolute nightmare. It definitely was a while back because you've got a screen and you've got a mobile phone and you've got streaming, you've got potentially downloaded on a mobile phone. And you're thinking these two devices belong to the same user. How do I frequency cap such an environment? What is CTV out of it? Is one of them OTT or is it mobile video? Which department fit with, etc., etc. But it's very similar in a way to social media, where you started off with liking a picture on Facebook, and now you can share so much location, stories, contacts, and so many apps are coming on board that are social, the same way so many apps are coming on board that CTV. So it's just a maturing landscape. And therefore, I don't think fragmentation is actually going to go away anytime soon, but it's allowing agencies and brands to discover new audiences. Now, going back to your question, I think we are making progress. With merging departments and stuff like that on the buy side. But speaking more from the buying perspective, one consideration to make CTV buying a little less fragmented and say more inclusive will be to utilize a more biddable sort of open market environment. So let's say broadcasters and streamers were to embrace a type of selling as opposed to this type of selling more open, as opposed to a walled garden approach. It will provide buyers with a slightly less fragmented and more kind of inclusive approach to buying and planning. And then that will just encourage further experimentation, allow them to invest more, and then see how it compares to upfront deals.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting to hear. I like that take, buddy. Thanks for sharing that. And Stafanie, sorry, go on, Adam.
And an answer to that as well. I think it's almost like we're looking back on the sort of digital revolution as well, in terms of TV digital revolution that in the UK at least happened back in the sort of early 2000s. There was this massive explosion of channels. At the time, they were linear channels because VOD didn't really exist. But at that point in time, there was a whole bunch of media sales houses that sort of cropped up. And we went through that fragmentation then. Historically, you had ITV and Channel 4 and Sky, and they'd existed for a long period of time. Then you had all these other smaller ones exist. Fast forward a little bit, that fragmentation then condensed back again, and you ended up again with 3 sales houses in the UK. So it's almost like a look back to look forward as to what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's lots of similarities. I think, Jaidev, you hit the nail on the head. Even if you look at the mobile app ecosystem, I'm not saying we're going to have the same number of apps in CTV that we've had in the mobile space historically. But when you look at things like measurement, consistency of standards, the way in which you target audiences, I think those on the buy side are going through a similar journey at the moment. Stafanie, from your side, I know you spend a lot of time speaking to some of the biggest buyers in the UK and ad agencies. What's your take on where we're currently at when it comes to fragmentation and interoperability across different streaming services?
So I think when we talk about fragmentation, we really talk about 2 separate things. So there's fragmentation in terms of the content and where it sits, which is actually, I think, a very positive thing because there is more and more variety. Which also drives, I think, a very healthy price competition, which is a good thing from a buying perspective. But I totally agree with Jaidev that it is an absolute nightmare if you look at fragmentation from a device fragmentation, because that is a real conundrum for buyers. And that's one of the major blockers we hear from our agencies or advertisers when it comes to driving more spend onto CTV.
Yep.
And I'm not saying we've found the solution yet. It's very much tied to the measurement piece, and I really hope that the next panel will talk more about that. But I think it's got 2 sides to it. On one side, I encourage the fragmentation of different content being across different. It's not just a monopoly. It's very much, there's a lot out there, and users are flocking towards different platforms and different contents, and on different devices. So I think there's a nuance to the whole fragmentation question.
Yeah. And I think I would agree, certainly when it comes to the discovery of content. I think over the next several years, the real battleground in CTV is going to be around content discovery. I think the intuitive search capabilities that users have had in desktop or mobile are going to come to CTV, and they're going to arrive pretty aggressively. All of the TV OEMs at the moment, the major tier ones, are investing in building out their proprietary advertising businesses. They want to make it easier for their audiences to be able to search and discover content, and beyond just those 2 or 3 services that have a dominant position on household TV remotes. It's how does the user search beyond that to find an increasing number of free and low cost streaming services to supplement their existing BVOD or SVOD companies that they're engaged with on a daily basis. So if we look at inventory, and if we're all agreeing the fact that it's still quite fragmented, and I think we're saying that fragmentation isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's a sign of a healthy market that's growing very quickly. We know that TV is still the most powerful medium there is for advertisers to engage with their customers. It's still the biggest screen in the household. But in reality, the only thing that's really changing is that delivery mechanism. It's no longer arriving in people's homes via aerials attached to their chimneys or via cables. It's being delivered via the household IP. So it's bringing the enormity and power of television, but with the precision of digital targeting. Hence, lots of people, including myself, are excited about what programmatic means to those on both the buy and sell sides of addressable TV. But that was a segue into my next question around, if there's fragmentation on the supply side, are we surprised that it's still quite a fragmented way to measure holistically in CTV. So if you're an agency today, you know that you want to be on television because it's a fantastic way to engage with those audiences. You know that the broadcasters have enormous reach in the UK. You know that the SVOD companies have enormous reach. And increasingly, those AVOD and FAST services are growing their daily active users on a daily basis. But how do you measure across all of them? How do you measure holistic reach, frequency, and even attribution? Is there a way to do that today? Or are we still some way off that utopia? Adam, I know you and I debated this at length. Again, very high level, where are we today if you're a brand or agency saying, great, I want to target all of these environments, I want to supplement my linear reach with some AVOD and FAST, but can I measure it all in one place?
I think we're not there yet.
Okay.
I think we're slowly getting there, slowly but surely. I think that's very market dependent. Obviously, this is an IAB Europe panel. I think some markets are probably a little bit further ahead than others. I think we are lucky in the UK that we've got Barb, for example, and I know Barb will be talked about as being slightly antiquated and it's panel based, and but it's the currency, right? It is the currency of TV. And I think Barb coming out and talking about fit for TV and pulling in the SVOD platforms into their measurement through the panel and going even one step further and bringing on more and more platforms into that measurement is a good thing, because it's going to allow that to happen. Now, is it going to be complicated? Is it going to be difficult for them to really hone down when you're working on a panel basis? Yeah, probably. But I know that there's lots of ongoing conversations with them about how they can fuse panel data with big data sets that we get.
Okay.
I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, excellent. And Sarah, again, I know I've actually written some of your really interesting and great articles on this topic, right, around what the future of measurement looks like and how do we make it more seamless for those on the buy side. What's your high level take on what's possible today and where might we be in several years' time?
Yeah, I think we've definitely made some good progress. Things like ACR have enabled us to actually start exploring incremental reach and things. Should I explain ACR?
Yeah. Just quickly, I want to make sure I'm always guilty of it and using too many acronyms. But what is ACR?
I said it. And I was like, I need to clarify. Automatic content recognition. The possibility by mainly tech or devices to actually see what's on the glass and then be able to say, compare how much of a linear campaign or CTV campaign has been seen and measure the incremental reach off of that. It's also used for targeting things. That kind of technology has definitely improved things. Adam said it's not in every market, so it really has to do with the penetrations in particular markets. But UK, Germany, for example, we've definitely progressed there. There are also, obviously, I think we've made progression in things like brand uplift. That's becoming much more standard to actually do that. Nielsen and other partners are doing that a lot. Attribution to an extent, but more attribution with a user visiting the site after seeing, not actually going right down to an acquisition. Okay. I think that does have its limitations though, because CTV ultimately has so much more of an impact purely than a direct, someone went to the site afterwards. I think it has a cultural impact. We did a research last year and people were putting things about how they sat at home and watched with their family. It's their relaxing time and things. I think that kind of impact and memorability and things, we need to take that into account. I don't think we want to get to a stage where it's, I didn't hit my CPA on CTV, therefore I'm cutting it. I don't think we want to get to that stage. There's been progress, but still, we still need a lot more. We still need a lot more progress to make it more seamless, I think.
Excellent. Appreciate that. And Stafanie, from your side, have you got any thoughts on what audience measurement might look like in several years' time versus maybe where we are today?
Oh, several years' time, I think a lot can happen. But from my point of view, there needs to be a bit of lower guards in terms of what we have in terms of measurement is already better than we had before, and we need to be a bit more gentle with and not less strict, which is what Sarah also I think mentioned in our discussions. Is there are things we can measure. Again, what does an advertiser want to measure is probably one of the most important questions. Yes, reach and frequency are still difficult, or effective reach in essence, if you look at the broad scheme of different devices that you can reach a user. But then things like attribution, there are solutions which may not be perfect at this stage, but there are solutions where you can measure how a CTV campaign has impacted things which would normally not be addressed in a linear TV campaign, such as more performance-driven KPIs. And there are different partners out in that space, which can show, and we've had clients who we would probably not traditionally approach with the CTV campaign, but they are very much in the DRTV space, and we have shown together with these attribution partners that you can drive sometimes even better outcome with CTV campaigns. Maybe also because the cost per the CPMs are lower than what you would expect from a linear TV campaign, and therefore it balances it out. So there's different things that we can measure. I think other things which are probably up and coming is attention metrics. There's definitely room to grow, but we also need to acknowledge that there has been progress made.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thanks for that, Stafanie. And Jaidev, from your side, buddy, if you look at programmatic ad buyers, when they're buying in CTV environments, are you seeing any trends around a desire to measure that activity like digital, or is there an understanding that it will still be measured like traditional linear TV? Because I think, Adam, you hit the nail on the head around that debate. Lots of people are still saying, do you measure it using panels? Because that's the way TV's been measured for the last 25 years. Or do you measure it on impression-based data because it's been delivered via the household IP? Jaidev, have you got any kind of sound bites around how ad buyers are thinking about audience measurement when it comes to their able and fast buyers within PubMatic?
So I think, speaking from the buy side, different agencies are at different stages in this sort of CTV journey, should we call it. To provide an example of one agency that I spoke to, who are probably arguably at a much more advanced stage, so no surprise, they were looking into attention, because attention seems to be like the trend and the buzzword this year. But as opposed to treating attention in CTV a bit like a viewability metric, where they just blanket say anything over 70% in general in digital is good, they wanted to push the boundaries and utilize different levers. So they wanted to see what works best. Is it high attention span, low attention span, small screens, big screens, etc.? Because saying I just want a blanket high attention audience could not only be irrelevant for a campaign, but it could also be pretty costly for a campaign. So I thought this was a great thing by them, because it's looking at what CTV and digital has to offer and the different layers and levers that you can play about with. And speaking more widely at PubMatic, we have let's call it a measurement suite. And within that, there's about 4 different attention measurement partners that we partner with. And we're able to scope this not only across CTV, but more total video, so multiple screens. And that kind of goes to me watching David Beckham on different screens. And I think that's where the beauty lies, right? It's taking this kind of fragmented viewing experience across multiple devices and somehow being able to measure it in a more bespoke way by actually using the power of digital. And then you can assess what makes the impacts. Because like how Steph mentioned earlier, measurement kind of means different things to different campaigns and different clients. What is it that they're actually after? Is one advertiser might be after reach, another performance, and within performance you've got so many layers, and another one might be after attention. So it's a case of, firstly, we need to not consistently compare linear to CTV, because that's a bit like square pegs and round holes. More of a case of we should concentrate on I don't know, I feel like I've coined this term from somewhere, but like an outcomes-based measurement framework. And the framework is basically looking to identify on a campaign level, what is a KPI and what is a goal? And what measurement solutions exist and how can we leverage CTV and make it a bit bespoke. And that will help. That definitely does help buyers sort of navigate an environment that's CTV just naturally fragmented.
Okay, thanks for that. So if I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like it's going to probably be a hybrid of panel-based with impression-based methodologies to deliver what the future of audience measurement looks like across CTV. Today, there's innovation around what Barb is doing with C-Flight. I think you touched upon that earlier, Adam. There's lots of other companies at the moment trying to figure out what the new methodology should be and what the de facto currency should be. But it's still an ongoing industry discussion as we figure out what those best practices look like. Jaidev, you said something in your response there that was very interesting, and it leads me on to our next question. I don't think we've got it in the prep, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Outcomes, performance advertising. Out of interest, and for anyone else listening to this webinar, Is it predominantly branding budgets in CTV at the moment, or are we starting to see new entrants? So performance-based advertisers that maybe historically didn't have the creatives, or they didn't have the big global budgets to get into those linear ad breaks. I think personally that the performance space is really going to take off in CTV, but sometimes I get laughed at. So what's your view on more performance budgets entering CTV? Who wants to take that one?
I can go first. Go on, Sarah.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I think it definitely is, because some of the methods that we have now are enabling that. So QR codes, obviously one, it's been around for a while, but it's gaining traction. We've also got voice commands. You can literally say a command. If you have a smart speaker in your room, it can send the link, the product, the discount code, whatever it is, to your device. I think those mechanisms are going to enable more spend from that space. The only thing is, we don't want it. We still have to make sure that we're very clear on the branding element of it as well, so that we don't go down too much to that. But still predominantly branding, I would say, but it's definitely starting to open up.
Yeah, I get that. And that's similar to some of the conversations I've had as well. So it's about, just because we can doesn't necessarily mean that we should, but there are lots of AVOD and fast services that newer entrants to the market that don't have those legacy relationships with advertisers. They don't have those deep rooted brand upfront commitments that many global broadcasters have. So they've had the ability to open up their inventory, to really lean into programmatic and extract some of those digital first ad dollars and some of those DR first ad campaigns. Sorry, Jaidev, I cut you off, buddy, but your school of thought around more performance ad dollars in CTV?
I think Sarah stole my thunder there. But no, I think this is CTV is a really exciting space for the kind of new entrants. I think one of the guys on the panel before alluded to the cost of entry now is a lot lower than linear. So you're getting a lot more of the digital guys saying, I actually wouldn't mind buying a bit of a bigger screen, because they're buying video anyway. So CTV just complements the sound as always on, that it's close to 100%, and it's mostly non-skip. It's all like quite complementary, and it's then a case of how do we experiment further? And you've got partners such as Advertiser who can do loads of different things. And I think I think it was the last panel where they mentioned kind of app tracking as well via Kakar and others. There's that measure, that there's sort of measurability solutions are slowly coming forth, and along with that, it's like it's working in parallel. It's more newer kind of performance driven advertisers are looking at top of the funnel and seeing how CTV can actually push it down and then make it measurable and test that impact. So the price to entry is so low that it does make sense for some of them.
And I guess they've got the ability to upweight or downweight in real time, right? In traditional TV, sometimes very hard to pull out of a campaign. If, for instance, a global pandemic strikes or something horrible happens around the world, as we're seeing at the moment, the nature of programmatic enables an ad buyer to, again, dip in and dip out dependent on macroeconomic environments, price points, performance. Stafanie, from some of the advertisers that you speak to, I'm interested, as we talk about performance ad budgets entering CTV, when it comes to identity and targeting, what are ad buyers really targeting at the moment? Is it, I know there's no third-party cookies in CTV, but what's the de facto form of identity at the moment? Is there one that those on the buy side generally go after in CTV?
At the moment, it's still very much, we try to push genre that we get, information that we get from the publishers themselves or from the broadcasters, where we package them up in context or in different categories. So that's 100% cookieless and works really well. And to my point from the very beginning, because there is such a wider range of different content around that provides scale, and not just scale on a run of network campaign, but also actually if you want to target a specific content category, that's what we try to push as much as we can at the moment.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, and that's really interesting here. It's trying to provide those on the CTV buy side with more information around what's actually happening in the show, so beyond just app name or app streaming service or channel, it's okay, but let's look at maybe within the video, what are the contextual relevancies that you could perhaps target?
Okay,
cool. I'd agree with that as well. I think we're definitely seeing that as a trend from what we're selling. I think the other thing that we are seeing more and more of is that kind of I don't want to call them long tail of advertiser, but more local advertiser who are effectively using geo as that sort of targeting group set to go, I only want to be relevant in this very specific area and I want to upweight there. And to your point, Jaidev, the barrier of entry from a cost perspective is much lower because of that. They're not having to do a national campaign. That's what we're seeing more and more of a trend of, is hyper local advertisers coming out and wanting to buy very specific regions.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Adam. And from again, a topic you and I have discussed at various different events over the last couple of months, in your experience, and not necessarily where you are at the moment, just broadly speaking across the industry, what is predominantly the main form of identification? I know we've talked about context and show level data, but in the mobile world, it's predominantly device IDs. In the desktop world, it's been third-party cookies, or increasingly those alternative IDs like UID. Does CTV face an identity challenge in the same way that desktop browsers and the mobile in-app space does? Is it immune from that at the moment? Hence, people are talking about those ad budgets maybe transitioning into CTV due to the signal loss that's happening in other places.
It's definitely harder, right, from a sort of audience demographic perspective. But I think what we're seeing more and more, and we talked about this a lot, particularly with other people in the industry, but it's postcode, right? In the programmatic ecosystem, being able to target postcode is super, super simple. Yeah. And if you can get an understanding of who's in that postcode, what's the sort of likely demographic of that postcode, that then becomes your identity, right? And it almost becomes omni-channel because of that. Yeah. You can go across all devices, you can go across all platforms, all at the same time, basically tying it back to an IP address with a postcode. So I think we'll start to see more and more of that happening. I think Sky Ad Smart was probably the predecessor to CTV in doing a lot of that stuff. But I think lift and shift, you can do it in CTV today. So focus on it more and more.
No, that's a fair point. And I guess, Sarah, again, I think you and I have discussed this, but in desktop and mobile, it's very much about that one-to-one communication. But in CTV, it's about the household. There is less need to get into that laser focused, okay, who is the person? What is the form of identification that tells us that it's that person versus, okay, it's at the household level. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we've got to remember. I think that is one thing that gets forgotten a little bit when we get in that mode of like, I have to know exactly who I'm targeting, who is watching everything. I think we do forget that a little bit because we're so used to that hyper one-to-one kind of messaging that we have on mobile and things. But we have to remember it's a shared device. 4 or 5 people can be watching at the same time. If you're targeting, even if you know who owns the device, their granny could be visiting and she's watching. Yep. And that is a different need set or buyer than her grandson. So I think we have to look at it, as Adam said, at a higher level. And as long as we are reaching that higher level and understanding that, and then combine that with contextual, I think you have an effective way of targeting. We just have to, not be so focused on what we have done in other devices.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
It's funny that, Sarah, because that's how linear TV broadcasters have talked about it for ages anyway. Co-viewing. They apply a co-viewing factor to all of their campaigns. Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, so, I think. Sorry.
No, go on, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I think because CTV is delivered digitally, though, that's almost forgotten about because it sits in the middle. It's almost okay. Because we have digital ability, let's target it like digital, but we have to always remember it is ultimately TV from a user's perspective.
Yeah. But then, Sarah, who in your experience, and Stafanie and Jaidev, when it comes to the holding codes and the agencies, who is actually now responsible for CTV? Is it the AV teams? Is it? I know this is a question that gets asked daily in various different forums and groups, but again, for the benefit of our listeners today, broadly speaking, are there any precedents yet within the holding codes, or is it each group kind of case by case scenario?
Yeah, it depends on the group. It really does. It can depend on the client. I've had client budgets come from the TV team, but be planned and bought by the programmatic team. I'd say overall digital is probably, and AV teams are getting more involved now, but yeah, it depends.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think Donatus mentioned it in the last panel as well. It is still quite siloed, but hopefully it will come all together. And to Sarah's point earlier, it's very much the different teams ask you for different metrics and for different ways of proving that CTV is working. So it's a challenge, but it's also some things work more with AV teams, others with digital teams. So interesting space.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. I can see, are we almost at time? I can see it.
Yeah, you are.
I've got one quick question. I would just like
Cool.
to very quickly go around each panelist. If I was to ask you to give me one or two words to describe the European CTV ecosystem at the moment, what would they be? Sarah, let's start with yourself.
Exciting and growth.
I
And
like that.
innovation. I'm going to say innovation as well, because we're seeing so much more of that when it comes to creativity and everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. Adam?
You stole my words, Sarah. Growing. I was going to say growing.
Yeah, I like that one. Stephanie?
I would say challenges and solutions, because there is always a solution to a challenge, definitely.
Jaidev?
We're on a panel that says fragmented, so I'm just going to say growing and fragmented.
Nice. Okay. And I guess I would say exciting, right? There's never been a better time to be a TV viewer or a TV advertiser. The way we watch and engage with television is changing quicker than ever before. Thank you to my panelists, and thank you to the IAB Europe for enabling us to have this discussion today.